Great. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much to join into the last panel of the ICC Supply Chain Forum 2023. Unfortunately, in a digital version, but on the other hand, it fits perfectly to our motto of the last panel. It's paperless trade and beyond. And that's exactly what we today want to discuss with you. My name is David Saive. I'm Special Advisor, International Trade, Finance and Digitalization for the ICC Germany. And together with my co-host and sponsor of this event, Philipp Reusch, we will be guiding you to today's panel. Just for the agenda, I will start with a brief introduction, with a brief keynote. Then afterwards, our beloved panelists will say something about themselves, and then we enter into the discussion about what we think paperless trade is, what paperless trade means, and yeah, what comes beyond. Today, I'm very proud to introduce Anna Mitrovic, working for HCL Tech, Johanna Wegner, working for Chamber of Commerce in Munich, Ingo Müller from DAXA, Felix Mattes from Allianz Trade, and Henning Ralf from Schumann. Thank you very much for joining. Before we start, as I said, I will start with a brief keynote, and what I want to show you is the tiers of international trade. Because when Philipp and I were setting up this panel, we thought it would make sense to have representatives of all international parties involved in international trade, being representatives of shippers, of consignees, producers, banks, and other trade risk carriers, authorities, logistics service providers, and so on and so on. So when we talk about international trade, on tier 0, there's the product. Without the product, there wouldn't be any trade, any exchange of goods, any documents. And what we see when we look at international trade is that paper plays a certain role in international trade at the moment. On tier 0, on the product level, there's mandatory product compliance documentation, certificates, manuals, etc., that accompany the goods. Our expert here is my co-host, Philipp Reusch. He's founder of and attorney at law at Reusch Law. He's the head of regulatory affairs and market measures, also lecturer for product liability and product safety, and an expert in the area of product liability, product safety, and also recall management. And he will later on introduce himself and explain a bit more what digitization brings on the product tier. On the trade level, also paper plays a big role. For example, if we look at Article 34 of the CISG, we see that if the seller is bound to hand over documents relating to the goods, he must hand them over at the time and place and in the form required by the contract. Again, documents play a crucial role, because if these documents are lacking, the parties have a breach of contract, and the consequences arising from this are crucial. On tier 2, we have the transport level, because when there are goods exchanged, they also must be transported. And again, documents, paper, plays a crucial role. For example, just as one example, and this is something you find in every other international legislation governing transport, we see that also in transport, the sender shall attach the necessary documents to the consignment note or place them at the disposal to make sure that the carrier himself can fulfill his transport obligations. Looking a bit closer, we see also in transport insurance, the insurance certificates play a crucial role because they are used as proof for the transport insurance and must also be presented when it comes to trade finance. But also at the level of traffic and customs control, we see that we need to accompany the goods with documents to facilitate border and customs controls. For example, the certificates of origin play a crucial role here again. On the trade risk and trade finance level, again, and this is something that plays a crucial role for the ICC's work in the last 20 years, we could say, we see that banks and guarantors only deal with documents and not with goods, services, or performance to which the documents may relate. That means without any documents in place, there is no financing of the export process. There is no risk carriage in an international trade transaction. But is this the future? Is this how we should continue in the future? Or shouldn't we think about one digital and harmonized system for international trade to go paperless and beyond? And this is the question that I like to discuss with my fellow panelists here. And yeah, let's see where the journey starts. Anna, please introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you so much, David. I hope I'm audible. Can someone just please give me a short hint, but I think it should be working. Yeah, okay, good. So yeah, hi, my name is Anna Mitrovic. I'm an account director in financial services at HCL Tech. So HCL Tech is one of the world's leading IT service providers, and we look at our customers' overall digital journey. So being in financial services, I still work with banks on a daily basis, and I still have a very good insight into the digital market. However, what actually brought me into the world of trade finance and also to my passion for trade finance and paperless trade is actually the decades or 10 years that I spent in working in trade finance in different areas across the market. So I started my career in trade finance as a guarantee specialist, and in concrete, to shed some transparency on what that meant at the time, was I was really the person at the bank who received a paper request form from the corporate customer. I would check the data on the request form, I would put it manually into the system, we would process it, we would print it on a paper, we would sign it with a pen, and we would post it with an envelope to the beneficiary. And we would also receive the documents in paper. So as you can tell by the amounts of time that I said paper in the past 30 seconds, this is the first thing that stood out to me when I first started in trade finance. This is a lot of paper. And besides the fact that the field is so interesting and the regulations behind it and the modality of the payment obligation are so interesting, this really stood out to me. And I wanted to go into the field of trying to digitize that a bit more. So from the specialist side, I then moved into operations and process management. So at the time I was heading an operations team within a bank, and I was focusing on strategic workflow management and really reducing the manual interference, the paper chaos, if I can say so, on the internal side. And after that, I was also really interested in seeing what actually happens on the corporate customer side. So I decided to transition into trade finance sales, which then really for the first time also gave me an insight into the customer's perception of digital trade and the need for the solutions in the market. And particularly at that time, it was really interesting because that was when the COVID pandemic hit the market. And this is really where we witnessed a really interesting transition in trade, particularly because trade is such a very document heavy business. And this was the time when we really started moving into home office, and conducting these paper-based procedures became more and more difficult. So that really shaped the demand, in my perspective, for digital trade. So I decided to go to work for a trade finance fintech provider. And for those 2 years, I really tried to bring in the procedural knowledge that I had and the knowledge of the payment obligations and the trade finance transactions as such into the product, and then try to help place the product in the market by speaking to the customers on the corporate and also on the financial institution side. So with all that being said, as a former product specialist, as someone who has looked at the topic from various different angles, from a specialist side, from a regulation side, also working with the ICC for a bit, and also for someone who is in her current role really passionate about digitization and digital solutions and bringing them to our clients on a day-to-day, I'm really interested in looking into how we can actually promote a more digital trade world by helping to create a transparency in the market and also making the topic a bit more tangible for a broader audience. And I think this is also why having a panel like this is so important, so we can actually discuss this and make the topic available to the market. So the transparency is needed, in the market to create the mindset shift that we need to create the change. So I'm really excited to have this discussion today. And with all of that, I want to thank the ICC Germany for having me, and David and Philip. And over to you, David. Thanks.
Oh, thank you very much. I didn't count exactly, but I think you mentioned paper around 10 times. So let's see what Joanna can tell us about paper in her current business. Thank you, Anna.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, my name is Johanna Wegner. First of all, I want to thank you for having me here today and to discuss paperless trade, digitalization, and things like that. So thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm a mom of two. I'm a wife and a lawyer, and since 2015, I'm working for the Munich Chamber of Commerce as head of divisions, customs and foreign trade law. And my daily work is driven by the needs of my members. And when I talk about needs, it's needs in terms of customs and foreign trade law. And my work or my job is to make my members' day more efficient, more easy. And in my opinion, there's only one way: digitalization and paperless trade. And yes, working for an institution, for a public institution like me, doesn't mean that you are in a position to claim for solutions. In my opinion, or what I think is, you have to install these kind of solutions. And that's why, together with my colleague from the Chamber of Commerce in Koblenz, Andrea Wedig, we kind of reinvented a system in Germany that is responsible for the issuance of certificates of origins. And I can come up to that later. We had a very successful launch in 2019. And today we can say that nearly 75% of all the documents are based on electronic means. So we're very proud of that. And in Munich and Koblenz, we have a higher rate. I have to mention that we are here at 99%. So this is a very good result, I think. And Andrea and me, when I say we are working on it, that's why, because we didn't install the system and then laid back and relaxed a little bit, but we are still working on it every day to improve and to be up to date and to keep the system state of the art. And when you look at customs documents from a chamber point of view, there's another document as well, KNI ATA and CPD, issued by the Chambers of Commerce in Germany. And in Munich, we installed an electronic system last year. We reached a rate now from nearly 90% within only a year. And I think this is what we should talk about, the needs of businesses and our answers we can provide them. And just to make a funny note in the end, Anna is a little bit younger than me. And when I started my legal career, I met a client in Austria, and he said, "Oh, relax, Ms. Wegner, relax. Internet, this is temporary." Yeah. So I think, no, it's not temporary. It's our daily work and business. And that's what I'm working on together, especially with Andrea, but especially also with my colleagues from DIHK. We are at the moment working on a full digitally based KNI, ATA and CPD. And I'm very happy to announce today that the German customs authorities are supporting us from now on. So far from me.
Wow, that's amazing news. Thank you, Hannah. That's congratulations. And I see the Chamber of Commerce in Munich is one of the leading chambers. So I'm very happy you made it today. So look at the transport sector, logistics service provider, and please introduce yourself, Ingo Müller. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, David. As David said, my name is Ingo Müller. I'm working for one of the bigger German logistics companies. You see it, I think, in my background. But not that that's, I think, the reason why I'm here. The reason is we are also very engaged in a community which calls the Open Logistics Foundation, and DAXA is one of the founding members, where we want to handle with the major problems within the transport industry on a common base, and not to be a single fighter, but to work together to bring to reach a bigger target, a bigger goal. And for that, I'm sitting there in the logistical steering committee, and I'm very proud that I'm head of the first working group which we installed. And this working group, now we come to the conclusion why I'm here, is handling the electronic transport documents. And within this project, or within this working group, we start the project to install electronic CMR, the eCMR, under the German restrictions, under the European restriction. It's very important for us that we are not only a German foundation, together with, let's say, the other three big German logistics providers. But we want to be really in Europe, and we have participants from Austria, from the Netherlands, from Switzerland. And that's the reason why we work together to make the transport documents digital. And we start with the eCMR. Probably somebody from last year, or in the end of 2021, the German government bring the eCMR rules to a German law with effect of 1st of April 2022. And more or less at this time, we are working on presenting open source solution for creating this eCMR. So without giving you in the hand of one platform organization with just want to pick up some money for making things digital, but we want to bring it for everybody on the market on an open source character, and with all the possibilities and advantages of an electronic CMR. We are not quite passing the finish line, but we have the first very successful tests with different business partners. And I'm pretty sure that within this year, we can present a solution for an eCMR which is accepted by a wide or broad membership of transport companies, of senders and consignees, we hope, so that we can make the first document electronic. And talking about paperwork, what Anna and Johanna talked about before, it's when I started my journey in the transport business, I learned, and Johanna, you probably now start to laugh, to write a Carnet ATA on a typewriter. And somebody who did it before knows that is a hell of a work, because you have 10 to 12 copies. And if you fail one letter, you are out of business.
Yes, and we put it into a trash can only 3 years ago. The typing machine.
And you can imagine, I started nearly 32 years ago my career, and it cost nearly 30 years to bring this away. And this is what we want to speed up this the speed for bringing away paper. For example, the eCMR is just the first step. That's the reason why our working group is named Electronic Transport Documents. There are so much more documents. And Johanna, I read about your initiative about the ATA, Carnet, and I'm very pleased or very happy about this. And we will look into it, that also from the transporter side, we will provide the possibilities and try to initiate the whole workflow completely digitally. And as I said, the eCMR is just the first step. There are a lot of more papers need to be digitalized, and not only in the sea and air transportation, but especially on the road transportation, because most of the freight is transported via the freight, or especially with border crossing. And if you imagine, for each of this truck, you have at least one eCMR printed in the moment on paper. and we want to get rid of it. And later on, all the other documents which are necessary, like delivery notes and whatever, I think that will benefit everybody in the supply chain. And yeah, hopefully we can join in this and learn a lot from together. And probably if we find some more supporter here in the round for the Open Logistics Foundation, everybody is invited to it. It's just not only for transport companies, but for everybody who is related to the supply chain. So much for me. I'm looking forward for your questions later on in the FAQs. And back to David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ingo. I think collaboration is king, and what is necessary to do is breaking the silos and bridging the silos. And for this, I'm very curious to learn more about Felix Matte's experience with typewriters at Allianz Trade and how they contribute to Paperless Trade. Felix, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, David. Thanks for having me. Yeah, very warm welcome from Hamburg. Yeah, I'm more than happy to join this panel discussion. In particular, since it is hosted by the ICC, I've got a deep love relationship with the ICC since I started my professional career some 12 years ago. Just as a side note, we are using the fantastic URDG rules the ICC drafted long ago on a daily basis still when we are providing international guarantees. I'm also a big fan of the ICC arbitration, not only the rules, but also your centers. So yeah, very proud to participate today. Yeah, about myself, I'm a lawyer by heart and by profession. I started my career in a corporate law firm, then did a master's specializing in international trade abroad at Stellenbosch. Coming back, I also learned more about the logistics in international trade because I was working in the shipping industry here in Hamburg. And some 9 years ago, I joined Allianz Trade, formerly known as Euler Hermes. And yeah, what I'm finding quite interesting in today's quite young discussion is that one of our niche products, the Carnet RTA, is so famous and still used by so many of you because we are actually the risk carrier behind this enabling product, as I used to call it, because it really it makes to help really to increase and ease the cross-border transportation of goods. So yeah, great to see that you like it. Yeah. What about, let's say, my current position? It's now I'm the legal coordinator for the global surety section of Allianz. So maybe to tell you a bit more about surety. What is surety? Obviously, it's like we try to call it a Yankee term. So it's more the Americanized version of what in Europe, more or less, banks are doing in a dominated way. So we are providing bonds and guarantees for high-end multinational companies as well as for small family-owned companies. So yeah, we are, let's say, trying to penetrate all sides of the markets. And since obviously at the high end, we are definitely talking more about the good old-fashioned manual labor because there's not so much room for automation and digitization. On the, let's say, lower and mid section of our business, we did a lot of digitalization and automatization developments in the last 10 years. For example, we were one of the first market practitioners who introduced e-bonds, which is, let's say, the electronic version of a good old Bürgschaft oder Garantie. And this helped us a lot. And not only for, let's say, cutting out the mail delivery, which usually takes, even if you are dealing on a national basis, at least one day, even usually a bit more, but also, let's say, makes it much more convenient for our clients to get rid of all their RKFs, which usually are related to bonds documentation, but also gives, due to the, let's say, the securities behind it, kind of verification measurements, and therefore for really legal proofed product. So we were quite happy to come up with this as one of the first players. Then I was also fortunate to act as a project manager for our 100% digitalized SME product called the KTV Smart, which is more or less a bond product for the let's say the entrance level for companies, and we were able to, let's say, not only produce a nice looking front end towards the markets and the sales channel. No, we were also able to enable the customer, our client, to do the contract maintenance themselves, meaning increase or decrease the levels of limits that they need. Also make sure they are able to check exactly what bonds they need and provide them with pre-drafted wordings, and at the end of the day also make sure that, let's say, they can see in real time their current exposure and how, let's say, things fit together. Then another let's say digitization initiative I was lucky to participate was the Guarantee Vault. I think we were one of the first insurers to join this great initiative, which is more or less a bit what Ingo described for, let's say, the transportation part of the sales cycles, is that we did, let's say, bring together the financing parties plus the beneficiaries and the clients in order to make sure that all the parties relevant for bonds and guarantees can be brought together to one particular platform. And yeah, I think we will have the time to maybe discuss a bit later about this project. Yeah, we did the same in Singapore in a bit lighter version, but so far what I'm overseeing globally, Guarantee Vault is, let's say, the leading initiative in the sector. I think for the moment that's all from my side, and yeah, happy to hand back to you, David.
Yeah, thank you very much, Felix. You mentioned many platform solutions, many IT solutions, but we haven't heard an IT guy yet. So this is why I'm super happy that we have Henning here to get the IT perspective here on track. Henning, please introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, David, for introducing me, and Philipp and the ASC as well for having us here at this panel. Yeah, and yeah, of course, a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Henning Reusch. I've been with Schumann for a bit more than 50 years in different positions. I have somehow a tech background, and I'm now a member of the executive board at Schumann. Let me perhaps drop a couple of words of what my company, what Schumann is doing. So for 25 years, we are offering solutions with a certain focus. So our focus is to make risk visible, accessible, tradable. So this is what Schumann is doing, and we have three main sectors, and I think all of them are relevant to the trade, to the international trade. So clients of ours are using software to assess risk for industry and trade companies. I think it's very relevant for financial service providers like factoring companies or leasing companies, and last but not least, surety providers like Allianz Trade or trade credit insurers, as Allianz is also doing, are some of our clients using our technology to digitalize their processes, and there are different aspects they need. For example, something Felix, you mentioned, portals like the Vault service is something very, very relevant. So onboarding portals for clients, or the functionality to do KYC checks automatically, or at least to have an end-to-end processing for new business. We at Schumann, I think we have a special view on this thing. We are very driven from both an credit risk side as well as driven from a process side. So we see this trade, this is supply chain of trade, David, you've shown from a risk perspective, and we see risk or an underlying transaction that causes risks of all these parties. So, and the risk is there when the producer starts producing the goods, when they start to selling it, when they have a leasing company perhaps financing a machine, or a factor buying the receivables, or an insurer covering the probability of a default or probability of an fraud. And what I think is that the underlying risk, the certain risk, could be a bit different, but the underlying transaction is somehow the same. And this is what drives me to use the fact that the transaction is the same. So we are talking about the same risk, and we are talking about the same companies. And this is what we are trying, what I'm trying to digitalize. And I see certain challenges. And to be honest, we see these challenges since 25 years. So some are very, very simple, but nevertheless very crucial. So to identify business partners. So we need some unique IDs, identifiers, or the challenge to avoid the entrance of data more than necessary. So in the best way, we only enter and store it once. At least we should try to electronically transfer this data. At the end, that should lead us to a more digital process. So that makes us possible to get things done faster, and at the end also more cost efficient. Let me first outline some of these challenges. I mentioned these unique identifiers. So I think there are some solutions in the market. There are some private data providers like Dun & Bradstreet. They have their unique identifier, or Felix, as far as I know, Allianz Trade has also unique IDs. I think this is something very, very relevant to identify a risk through the whole process. As far as I know, there are also local identifiers, local court numbers, or the VIT ID, but this is something very, very local, very, very national. And I think something where, I don't know, perhaps ICC might also help to set up such an ID, a unique ID. And another thing I mentioned is this data entry, unnecessary data entry. And what I experience is that we need two things. We need systems, back-end systems, IT systems that allow automatic processing, that allow workflows, and that provide connectivity. And I think the even more relevant thing is, which we together can achieve, is that we have to use this connectivity. So we have to connect these systems could be via platforms like Digital Vault Service, like TrackTech, like TradeX. This can help to connect systems. There are other technical possibilities. There are API gateways, REST interfaces to get these systems together. And in my ideal world, what drives me, this process of onboarding a new client, a risk, to KYC checks, to risk scoring and analysis, to send digital papers, could be carried out within a couple of seconds. And this is possible, and it's quite a hard work to get these things up and running, but it's possible. Yeah, to end, I would like to add a short note to what you, Ingo, said, this typewriter issue. We have a couple of clients, especially in the insurance industry, and one of our clients moved to a new building. And one of the things they had to move were also typewriters. And as far as I know, this was driven by some custom authorities asking to issue the bonds on their paper. This has to be done via typewriters. So they moved to a new building, introduced new digital software, and also had typewriters. Something perhaps we together can change. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Henning. I hope and I know we definitely will change this matter. Besides typewriters, you were also talking about unified IDs on a business and transactional level. But to introduce my co-host here, I'd like to know, what about unified IDs on product level? What's there on the market, Philipp?
Thank you very much. First of all, Oliver Wieck, David Saive, thank you for bringing that topic here on the table. It's, I think, a very interesting idea to have all that perspectives of the tiers of digital trade here in the same panel. And then speaking of that, my role is a little bit different because I'm just a lawyer dealing with everything with regard to the product liability and safety. So we are talking of the product itself, not the way it is financed, traded, shipped, whatsoever. And when we first met, David and me, we talked about what are the next steps in the digitalization for trade and for products. And what we found out is that there might be an upcoming development in the regulatory affairs framework for products that might be a carrier, not literally, but in a wider sense, a carrier for the development of digitalization of trade without being intentionally made for that. And I would like to, in the next minutes, draw your attention to that upcoming development in the product related regulatory affairs framework. What I'm talking about is something that is called a digital product passport. And many of you might have heard of the Green Deal, that initiative Ursula von der Leyen has set up as the president of the European Commission. And the Green Deal consists of several very different approaches with regard to the European Union's climate target for 2050. And one of that, of which the Green Deal consists, one of that drafts of an European regulatory affairs framework is something that is called the eco-design regulation. And you might do not know eco-design regulations or directives in the past, but as you see, we do not have that old light bulbs anymore, and that is because of the former eco-design regulatory affairs framework, and it has impacted our life in the past, and it will even more in the future in a good way, because its intention is to minimize the carbon footprints of products. But what is for us the interesting content of that eco-design draft the EU Commission has issued in 2022? This is the introduction of something that is called a digital product passport, and that digital product passport is going to simplify the exchange of product-related information between all players, like the manufacturers, the players in the supply chain, the authorities, customs, and consumers. So the idea is that this information about some attributes of the product are to be made available in compressed form online. So the plan is to make all relevant information about a product available, including, for example, materials from which the product is made of, like all that, especially with all that chemical substances issues. information about spare parts and reparability, energy consumption, the instructions of use, and at the end of the life cycle, the disposal of the product. And you can gain access to that information. For example, so the EU Commission do not have, let's say, doesn't have really an idea on how to technically solve that, but for example, they think of having something like a QR code you can scan on the product via an app, and you retrieve the information from a database that is called the Product Passport Register. And the idea of the digital product passport is to ensure a longer life of the product and the duration of use for the products that will typically decrease the let's say the carbon footprint and everything with regard to the circular economy, the adverse effects you'll see there at the moment. And besides the fact that currently there is no concrete timetable for the implementation so far, the digital product passport will solve many problems with regard to what I'm dealing with, like the customs and the market authorities, market surveillance and all that stuff, because they can easily assess that information on the product via that QR code or whatever technical solution you use. And it will therefore transform the way market surveillance in Europe is handled in the future. Nowadays, I don't know whether you're aware of or not, but nowadays you have two types of market surveillance in European Union. So on one hand, it's the customs guys that try to track and identify products that are not compliant with the regulatory affairs framework. And on the other hand, you have those market authorities, guys that are entering some kind of online platform markets or real markets, shopping different types of product and testing them, and then afterwards ramp up some kind of procedures against the manufacturers, the importers, the dealers, whoever is reachable within the European Union in order to have the products be recalled or replaced or withdrawn from the market with products that are compliant, or the non-compliant products are just destroyed, disposed whatsoever. And what you will see in the future is that for implementing that digital products passport that originally comes from the eco-design regulation, the European Union has to, let's say, however, adapt at least 70 directives and regulations that currently stipulate corresponding requirements for the labeling and instruction of products that has to be adapted at the European level nowadays. So when we try to merge that upcoming development in the product safety legal framework with the ideas and the needs you are facing, it might be a nice idea to think of why not having the product being the carrier of everything you need for having the digitalization of trade. Because if there is a situation in which the customs are able to check a product and its conformity by a QR code linked to a product passport register database, it is not, let's say, out of sight to think of a situation in which the banks or the surety companies have access or are granted access on the same way to the documentation which is necessary for their requirements. So if we are having the developments in mind and having an eye on those developments in the future, it might be of interest to merge the upcoming product safety requirements with the needs and requirements of the trade industry in the wider sense, and merge logistics requirements, banking requirements, surety requirements, and also the requirements of the respective authority with that database, giving them access to that database and having them access to the information that are necessary for them in order to get rid of that tons of piles of documentation you have to tackle typically when it comes to a cross-border transaction in a sale of goods way. So that was literally the idea of why David, it's not David, it's David, why David and me has talked that's 9 months ago, first time, about that development in which the both areas of what we do seem to overlap, and within that overlap there is, from my perspective, a big advantage of getting very efficiently to a new situation that solves several problems many of the tiers with regard to the product or the sales and the trade itself are facing at the moment. Hope that is another interesting part for the upcoming discussions, and I'm happy to be part of that. Thank you for having me here, Oliver Wieg, David Saive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Philipp. And I can see that we already got the first questions from our auditorium, which is super. And they are asking a question that also is stuck in my mind, because Philipp, what you envisaged was a certain layer of digital trust where all information, product and trade related is stored, and people trust that layer, that the information in there is correct. So the question from the audience is, how do we ensure trust in the digital world? In the document world, trust is ensured by wet ink signatures. But they suggest that the trust in the digital layer is maintained by digital signatures. Felix, what do you think about this take?
Yeah, I really like this comment. And obviously, as you mentioned, I think there are solutions now available, namely e-signatures, being it Namiral or DocuSign, in order to make sure we have that certain degree of authentication and of verification that which is needed for this particular document. That's fine, but from my personal view, I think we can do better. What do I mean with this? It's wouldn't it be a great idea maybe not to let's say see, okay, good, I have got valid signature under a certain document. Wouldn't it be even more convenient for all the parties involved to such a document to, let's say, have a kind of verification landing page or however you would like to call it, where, let's say, for example, you would just need, in case of a bond or a Bürgschaft, insert a particular code in order to make sure, okay, this bond was really issued by the particular risk carrier, and then, let's say, let the particular website take you by the hand and walk you through beyond, let's say, the verification, but also when it comes to a claims situation where you really are, as the beneficiary under this bond, are requesting payment. Wouldn't it be great, let's say, to have this personal walkthrough, what kind of documents and information are needed in order to make sure you verify your payment demand properly, and to enable the insurer or the bank to provide you with the funds in due course without this, let's say, kind of time-consuming force and back in order to justify a payment demand. That's, let's say, what we are working on, and yeah, we are happy to say that, let's say, part of it is already there, and the rest shall be there in due course. And another aspect of this would maybe you, David, could elaborate a bit on is, let's say, to even think beyond the solution I just tried to outline. If wouldn't it be great if, let's say, the solution would be also incorporated in the entire marketplace, and therefore I would maybe ask you to elaborate a bit on the systemics and the technique behind the guarantee vault.
Yeah, I can do that, but there are so many hands raised here in our panel. I like to give it back to them first. That is actually what I hoped this to be, that everyone wants to step in. I think, Philipp, you were the one first, but then you lowered your hand.
I have withdrawn my request to speak, but by asking me now, I will take my place. In a quick and dirty, as you may know, there is an initiative on the European Union's level about Gaia X. So I am pretty sure the former Minister of Economy in Germany, he still thinks of having Gaia X as an own Amazon Web Services here in Germany with tons of internet, with tons of server farms. But what we are trying to ramp up here with Gaia X is something like a trustworthy database and its requirements, where you can share information with many contributors on their respective level of needs. So there is still an upcoming, let's say, a meta level of technology that is able to deal with the exchange of trustworthy informations. And maybe we have to have that bear in mind when it comes to the discussion of trusted information and identities. But that were my 2 cents. Now I'm done.
Henning, I think you were the second.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I just want to add somehow a bit of a tech view on the thing. So from my point of view, I think there are 2 main ways of generating trust. So the one is, I think you mentioned this, is to have a central authority, a central database, an institution we do believe in. I think it's the same for money. So we could have central banks, and we believe that this European Central Bank is the authority. And the other more decentralized way is tech-based. So it's the technology, I think it's known, could be based on blockchain. And this is a more decentralized way, where we do not believe on one single institution, but have the data spread on different databases and have some technologies in place to make sure the data can't be changed and it's transparent. And I think these are, from a tech point, the 2 main ways of generating trust.
Yeah, Anna, please go, just step in.
Sure, thank you. I'm actually very happy this question came up, because it's one of my most favorite questions of all time in digital trade. I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So one way is the trust, obviously, that Henning already mentioned, and this kind of ties into what I initially said as to educating the market to adapt to a digital standard. And this is really something that the providers have to do. So for example, you'd be surprised to hear that, for example, now speaking of a guarantee of a surety, according to many European laws, it's actually not even required to digitally sign them for them to be legally enforced. And this is something many people don't know. So if we really educate the market in that sense, and that's not my job, that's a lawyer's job, but just as an example, I think we can make a huge step into the right direction. The second aspect to it is obviously, apologies. Yeah. So the second aspect to it is also the education that we have to do in terms of adaptation. And this is really something that happens in our minds, and that requires the mindset shift. Because if you think about it in a broader sense, if you have a physical document, you can fake a signature, you can fake a document, you can lose a document. And nobody questions that. So this is also something to consider. And the next thing that we need to think about is also everybody trusts Swift, for example. So nobody ever questions the integrity of Swift. And why? Because Swift has been around for such a long time, and Swift has been founded by banks, so by the users of the system itself. And this is what kind of creates the trust. And this is also what many of the providers are built on. So many of these creations in the market that provide digital payment obligations are actually founded market initiatives. And if you really deep dive into the products, what stands behind it, how they have been founded, what the legal groundwork was in the creation, I think that really then gives you the confidence to trust in the product.
Ingo was strongly nodding to everything you're saying.
Exactly. I also see the two different layers of this problem. On the one hand, what Henning said before, that you have the possibility to build trust into electronic documents by using the blockchain. That's the same what we try to with the eCMR. That we said, okay, let's make a checksum for each eCMR and save this checksum in a blockchain, so that we have solve two problems. On the one hand, it's not easy to change the eCMR afterwards, after a given signature or whatever. And the second part is you also have a kind of trust, because within the blockchain, you do not see the information of the eCMR, but just the checksum. So this is something what we try to bring to the market, that they can trust the version of the eCMR we will provide. And the blockchain, it is also important that the blockchain is handled by different parties, that the nodes are used or installed on different parties. And that's what the big success of the Open Logistics Foundation is, because there we have all the big major players on the market, and we try to bring some kind of authorities also into it. And then you say, okay, it's not possible to change these nodes of a blockchain all at once if you have the big players on the logistic market plus the authority in it. And that is our idea of gaining trust into the data. And on the other hand, I like the discussion also around the signature. I think in the future we will have these possibilities, yes, but I like to bring an electronic document now in the market. And there we need other solutions, because we do not have from Gaia X this solution in the next month, but we want to start with the eCMR in the next month. And in this moment, I always look at of course, also on the parcel market. If you receive a parcel from UPS, even if it's worth 10,000 euros, nobody asks about a signature on the paper. You do your writing on a sign of glass, and that's everything. Everybody trusts it. So, okay, if you talk about a deal about 25 millions, I agree that there we need a much more trust. But we even have the eCMR about good value about 2,000, 5,000 euros. And then we said, oh no, we don't do it because we do not have the electronic signature in which we can trust. But what is today? You have a piece of paper in the CMR, which anybody can make some crosses on it, and that's a signature. And I want to have some kind of common sense in this discussion, that we can say, okay, where it is necessary to really have the most strongly electronic signature on it, which is really not fraudable. So that's what my point is.
Thank you, Anna. You also raised your hand with regard to trust. So how do you ensure trust in your environment?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what Anna said. There was a very important phrase. She said that not all documents need a qualified digital signature. And I think before we talk about where and how to implement digital signatures or to replace them, we first have to talk about where are they necessary and where are they not necessary. And I can give you a good example from my own business. When I started working in this customs field for the German Chamber of Commerce, it was like 10 years ago. When a client filed in an application for a certificate of origin, he had to use a digital signature. And so it was Andrea and me. We sat down together. Andrea, my colleague from IHK Koblenz, and we sat together. We were just wondering, like little kids, and we were asking ourselves, why do they need it? Why? Where's the legal requirement for that? And so we checked the law, and we found a little changement in the law between the time when it was installed first and the time we checked it. And we just figured out, hey, we have a chance to remove it. We have a chance to quit that game. And that's what we did, actually. And we kind of delivered all businesses all over Germany from the necessity to provide for a digital signature when they demand for certificates of origin. We were very proud of that. It saved a lot of money to the companies, a lot of time, and it made home office available for all business, because if you use a digital signature, you have to install a card, how do you say, a reader. You have to provide for the card. You have to identify yourself. So please, before we talk about how to transfer it into the digital world, we have to talk about where is a digital signature that is nothing but my manual writing, my manual signing. Where is it necessary or not? And most of the businesses still today don't know that it is not necessary on most of the documents required. So this is, we have to clean up the floor. We have to talk about where can we remove it. And then I think we will reduce the amount from 100% to at least 10%. And the last 10% are mostly required by the foreign or third country and not by German or national or European law. So this is my this is what I think about when it comes up to digital signature. On the other hand, when I talk from my work for a public institution, for sure we use that. We use it for trust reasons. We use it for compliance reasons. We use it for verification reasons. But verification is not trust. And verification is something different from digital electronic signatures. So first step I think we have to do is clean up the floor and remove requirements of digital signature wherever necessary. And the second is we have to separate, and we really have to make a clear difference between what is verification of a document and what is trust in a document, and how to provide each term. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I really like the term of cleaning up the floor, because and education in that way, because this is something we really try to do here at the ICC Germany, but also the ICC worldwide organization. Ingo mentioned a very interesting thing. He said, well, in the B2C sector, sign on glass, for example, when we take a receipt of a parcel, is not an issue. When we talk business in B2B, then it's always wet ink on paper. And that's not only in the transport sector. The same thing we can see in the financial sector. It's not an issue for me to do all my trading on my phone. My whole bank is online. My insurance is completely online on my phone. But in business, we print paper. And as we learned today, we still talk about typewriters. So why is that so? Is it only because there's a knowledge gap, or is there something else? Who or what is holding back? What do you think? Henning, you are the IT provider. What do you think about this?
Well, I think this is a very, very big gap. Sometimes I feel there are 10 or 15 years gap between innovation on B2C compared with B2B innovation. I think mainly two reasons. I think the first reason is the number of transactions. So having in mind how many parcels DHL is shipping or UPS is shipping compared with big, complicated international trades. You have complete different other amounts of transactions where we can benefit from automating things. I think it's one aspect. And the other aspect is, I think, quite simple. There's no cost pressure. I think in the B2B sector, we are used to waiting long. We are used to having high transaction costs because writing paper, signing paper, sending paper, it's simply accepted. And I think there's enough margin in the market to live with this problem. I think this makes the challenge for us greater and harder to accelerate this digitalization. And I think it's quite easy. So as you said, David, let's simply look into the B2C segment and market and think what innovations we simply can adapt and get onto our B2B floor.
So, Felix, how's the situation at Allianz Trade? How much % of your trade risk is still done by manual work, paperwork? Or how digital are you right now?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good one. I'm not, let's say, can provide you with the exact figures by heart. And as you may appreciate, I can only, let's say, speak for the surety side of the house. The thing is, what we witnessed is that, let's say, in particular during the COVID crisis, our different markets developed in this regard in a, let's say, not simultaneous way. And sad but true, even if it is our largest BU in terms of gross written premium, the German market is the most reluctant to avoid e-signatures and e-bonds. So yeah, it's a bit strange, but that's how it is. So in particular in countries where the situation is a bit more remote, like for example in the US, where for example surety bonds are even issued via brokers, the situation differs. So they are much more used to adapting and embracing digital solutions than we are appearing to be in Germany.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I also have the feeling that the German market is very reluctant to digitalization. What do the others think? Is this a German issue?
Yeah, I think it's in Germany. It's in Germany, and let's say it's a German-speaking environment. But in fact, what my experience is, let's just try it, and let's go to our customers, to the consignees, and said, okay, you don't need to sign anymore. Here you have. You need to sign, but not sign in an ink paper way, and you can sign it on glass. You can sign it with your electronic signature or whatever. And I think if you start to do it, you pick the market with you. And I think that's what happened in during the Corona crisis in the B2C market. That because there's no other possibility, a lot of people walk this way. And what Henning said is really true. The money to do is in the moment is there, but it's far away from being very, very, very good or very easy work.
Yeah, thank you, Johanna. Just go on.
Yeah, the question, David, I think was, is it a typical German thing, a typical German problem? And I think, in my opinion, the problem is we've done it always that way. And that's why we keep on doing that. And I think we all have to change people's mind when it comes up to that point. For example, this is what I know from my daily work. People always ask me, no, they don't ask. They just do it. They always sign bills. That really gets on my nerves. Why is everyone signing bills? It is not necessary according to the German law. It is totally unnecessary, but everyone is stuck to signature on the bill. So when they ask me, and when my team comes up and say, well, is this valid, this document without signature? I say, yes, it is. It's just normally a requirement from the third party, from from other countries, but according to our national law, according to our Umsatzsteuergesetzbuch, oder wie auch immer es heißt, I don't know the English expression for that, well, it is not necessary. So when you ask people, why did you sign it? They say, because we've always done it that way. So I don't think it's typical German. I just think it's, we have to change people's mind, and we have to make them more open, and we have to reduce them to a minimum of the requirements made by national or European law. And in my opinion, they always go on top, and they always take a further step. And this might be very typical German, that we always try to be better than the rest, and we put something extra. So make it clear to everyone that here and there, on this and that document, it is not necessary. And there's no need for trust or for verification. It's simply not necessary, and it's not required by the law.
Johanna,
okay.
Johanna and I seem to seem to be agreeing a lot in this discussion, because I heard it so often, the famous saying, we've always done it that way. So that's something that is very dominant, particularly in the operations world. So it's just something you always did. You always signed a document, so you would just keep doing it. I think it's not particularly a German phenomenon. I think it's more, or at least in my experience, it's more tied to company size. So that's the experience that I made, because, for example, looking at the oil and gas industry that has a super high volume of trade transactions on a daily basis, or a commodity trader, they would happily just accept a printout of a Swift message. And as I said earlier, nobody's questioning that, and that doesn't have my physical signature as the issuer. So I think it's really, and I can't stress this enough, I think it's really a mindset thing. And it's also a matter of volume. So simply, the higher the volume, the higher the acceptance, simply because you can't keep emphasizing that inconvenience of signing everything. So I think that, in my experience, is also a big factor to it, is also how exposed is the company actually to trade transactions, and how many are there on a daily basis.
Yeah, that leads me to compliance, and again to my co-host. So when we look at compliance in a general perspective, how is digitalization going on there, when we have all the different regulations in place? Philipp, how's the situation there?
Well, so I don't think that I have a super 100% overall perspective of everything with regard to compliance, but as far as we see it within the work for our clients, so there are not so many regulations that force you to sign or have a paper-based version of every documentation with regard to compliance. But coming back to the discussion that the other panelists have, and that was very interesting, whether it is just a German problem or where does that come from, I think what we have to agree upon first is that we have a multi-stakeholder perspective on that one problem. There's the bank, there's the finance tax guys, and the authorities, and so. And if you have at least one of those stakeholders sticking to the principles of paper-based sign whatsoever, you cannot have an efficient digital system, because it forces you to have that. And just coming back to your question with the compliance, few of you might have heard that situation in Germany where you have to give your employees a written documentation about the content of the work contract you once have agreed upon with them. And none of you was without brains at that time, and none of you loses that brain during that time. But and it was based upon a European Union's directive that we have that law in Germany. So they have that in France and Spain and everything else. And they have forced the parties of an employment contract to give a written, and that means paper version of the contract that has already been concluded on 1,000 years before. And we are talking about, hey, why can't we be heading to the next step where we have all things paperless, when we have lawmakers that in 50% tend to come up with that documentation issue, aka paper. And you have that in banking things, they force the banks to show their documents to the Pricewaterhouse, Ernst & Young, KPMG guys, and they are sitting down there and do diligence some paperwork. And what no one is expecting, hey, listen, we are absolutely okay with those Basel III things or something like that. If you just have a digital database that gives an overview of the aggregated requirements, and we don't do paperwork anymore. So I think, first of all, it's a multi-player stakeholder perspective, and you need to have the agreement of all of them, the contribution of all of them. And I think the most important player, like lawmakers, they do not have that multi-player perspective on the problem. So you see that in the European Commission, they are all thinking in that DG Grow, DG Just, DG whatsoever, John Doe thing, and they cannot really think of an integrated system. So, and that is, from my perspective, why we should have not a situation in which efficiency can prevail. That is because the lawmakers are not so clever than they should be. To anyone in the auditorium that is maybe a lawmaker, apologize for that.
No, Philipp, actually, in my point of view, there's no need to apologize because you didn't say anything bad or wrong. The question is more international trade, and the whole international world has become so complex that it is not possible, I think, for the various departments at the EU or on a national level, the various ministries, to have a full view on the whole process, especially when it comes to international trade. And this is, in my view, exactly the thing that we see when we especially look at European regulation, where we have, for example, this electronic freight transport regulation in place dealing with B2G information exchange in the transport sector. Then we have an EU maritime single window on the other hand. We have a customs single window to be entered in some years. And all these regulations have these 200 pages reasoning in front where they say, this regulation specifically deals with this topic and does not touch the other topics. And you can see that it's not because they do not want that. The EU has regulation and interoperability regulation in place where they envisage a whole interoperable B2G communication, but they cannot because it's too complex. It's also the lawmakers, I think, that need education. But to make a question out of this, who is the one you think should be sitting in the driver's seat here? Maybe Ingo, this is a question for you because you've been working in this foundation for so long.
Or because you're driving these carries.
Probably. Okay, let's drive it in this way. Okay, I think what we try to do is really just make it, just do it. And I think that's what we need to do. I try to read the first parts of the FD regulation, what you just mentioned, David. And I really was frustrated after at least only 10 pages, and there were a lot more to come, because what you said, it was try to make it so individual or just for one case, and that makes things complex. That we learn everywhere. If things becomes too complex, they won't work anymore, or it costs tons of time to solve these problems. And that's the reason why we want to say, okay, let's do it on the simple way for the ECMR, give a showcase, make a lighthouse project out of it. And probably if we have problems that everybody comes into the driver's seat or agree with our way of going, let's look for a business case where it's not a problem to have the governance. For example, what we can do is even for the transport within our company, from when we drive from Germany to the Netherlands, we need this CMR in the moment, because probably some policeman on the road stopped our truck and asked for the paper. And if you don't get the paper, we get a fine. So what happened now, we said, okay, but the regulations around the CMR is very simple. Just the policeman must be happy, nobody more. And that's what we try. Let's find the easiest way to do it, and then we can widen the business case. So the first step we went already. The next step is to, okay, let's be both parts of people or companies within the Open Logistics Foundation, and then go ahead and said, okay, there is no problem with doing so and saving paperwork and make the processes much faster, because as soon as I need to print out a paper, somebody must go to the printer in the moment it was printed out and take it out and sign with wet ink, what we learned. And that's the thing. Let's try it in the way we can imagine the workflow, and then hopefully the government and the lawmakers come with us.
I just see from the audience, someone is proposing ICC should be in the driver's seat. I hope we are, actually. We had a big working group last year, at least in Germany, having all the industry involved to figure out a regulation for electronic transport documents. And we were quite successful because we made the German legislator pass a regulation through the Bundestag and Bundesrat governing electronic transport insurance certificates. So at least something that we contributed here. But when we are talking with our member companies and with partners, there's one term that, or one sentence that really stuck in my head. That was, the magic happens on the interfaces. So they were saying we need interoperable systems, APIs. And that's an IT thing. Henning, what do you think about this? Do we need API, or do we need global system, killer application, one size fits all? What do you think?
No, I actually don't believe in killer applications. I don't believe in there's one big thing like the new SAP system that will cover all aspects of what we discussed so far. So what I believe in, and where I think the also tech guys and architects believe in, this are smaller systems, they're very focused systems that are connected. So what we actually are working on is actually splitting our product landscape into smaller products that serve a special need, but that are connected. And I think this is the way how to solve this problem. And this is also the strategy to cut this split this big problem into smaller parts. But the challenge that is still there is a bit the hen or egg problem. So if you have the first product and the next product on the other hand, you can connect them both, but it's lacking the market. So this is something where we need cooperation. These initiatives Ingo is working in to get the push to get the relevant numbers of participants. And then I think that the connectivity is quite easy. I think cloud technology is getting more and more popular. It's very easy to get a platform in AWS or Microsoft Azure up and running. It takes you 2, 3, 4 weeks to have the first prototypes there. So the technology is there. I think the challenge is to get companies and people together and aligned. And I think this is why this panel, your work, the ICC work, is so important to get people together.
Yeah, thank you. Johanna, please.
Yes, I think we have to think big, but start small. we will not be able to put all the documents required in one big bowl, and then we build this one big system where everyone can attach and connect to, customs authorities, businesses, whoever needs to take a look at the documents or deal with them. So I think if I take our example, when we were talking in the beginning about the CANI ATA system, CANI is a typical example for a paper-based document that is traveling as a big book around the world together with the goods. And we were unable, I think you mentioned it, Ingo, before. You started 30 years ago, and it was a paper document. You were using a typing machine to fill in the formula. So it took us in Munich, it took us only 3 years to install a EATA CANI system. It was only 3 years to push a public tender, to do all the legal requirements, to install it, to do programmation work, only 3 years. But we did it independently. We did it not with all chambers of commerce in Germany, because if you want to put 79 interests in one bowl, no way to push this forward and to bring this to a successful end. So what we did was, we were the pilot. We just did it. We failed. We were lying on the floor. We were crying. We were putting back our crown on top, and we were restarting again. And we were working every day and night to make this possible. And then it happened. And within only 1 year, we have a digital quote of 90% of our clients using this digital service. And what happened then? All the other chambers in Germany were looking at us saying, wow, this is great. That works. Cool. Can we do this? And now we are doing, at the moment, the rollout nearly all over Germany. 63 chambers of commerce are participating and kind of jumping on the Munich train. So we can provide the system that we developed, that we installed, and which we started 3 years ago with. We can install it now all over Germany. And this experience strongly makes me believe that we can start with our own business. We can do our best. We can try, we can fail. And if we are coming up with a good role model, and if we come up with a good solution, the solution will be the solution for everyone in the end. And what makes it work in the end, and then I come back to David, is interfaces. We can connect the system to our old system in what is not old, but it's a little bit old, like 10, 15 years old. The systems we have in the Chamber of Commerce, our data system. And this is the next step we're working on. We started with the electronic system. Now we're working on the interfaces. And then we are working on interfaces with the DIHK, with ICC. So step by step. And we started small, but we always thought big, and we were always dreaming about giving a big rollout in Germany. And that's where we are, only 1 year later. So what I want to say is, we have to start with our own documents. Nobody in this round cares about certificates of origin and how to issue them. This is my job. So I have to do something. I have to improve it. I have to make it better, easier, and digital. That's what I did. And if it's good work, and if it works out for everyone, then this is a role model and can be adapted by everyone else. And with interfaces, we are afterwards able to connect the systems. But yeah, I don't think we can make this big bowl, put it all in, and then just mix it and come up with a good solution for every type of document and need. I don't think so.
Yeah, Johann, I totally agree, and I think it's a combination of making things possible, but also giving this smart, this slight push. So, and I think this push could be simply done by law, by regulations, could also be done by external things. So, for example, COVID, I think pushed digitalization a lot. I saw in the chat that some people have pointed out that other states are quite more down the road in accepting digital bonds by simply forcing them. And for example, I know that in the States, in the United States, a short time after COVID happened, they simply forced by law all states to accept digital bonds. And this was a massive push for digitalization. And this thing I think it goes in the same direction you mentioned.
Yeah, Corona was a booster for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I think, yeah, and and the second aspect, some of our clients experienced during COVID and during the lockdowns, they were not able to work. They were not able to issue bonds and papers because nobody was allowed to enter the office. And they had to agree, and each day one person was allowed to go into the office to print, to sign, to stamp the papers. And then they realized how dependent we are on ink, stamp, and paper.
I think just very briefly, and Henning, you said it earlier, and Johanna, you as well. I want to bring it back to the point of interconnectivity, because I feel like a large amount of the pushback in the market for digital change is always the argument, this will mean more work, or we have yet another fintech to onboard, we have yet another solution to work with. And I feel like once the market players understand that the solutions are more often than not actually directly integratable into their backend system, so they can really seamlessly communicate also amongst the systems with whether that's customer to bank communication on whatever end. So it really makes their life easier. But I feel like there is this myth going around that the system world that the market has created around digital trade makes actually operations more complex. And I feel like that is a lot where the pushback is also coming from. So I think it's a very good point also to highlight Henning, particularly in that context as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the need of this digital signature thing, or signing documents. When we, before COVID, when I take a look at my institution before COVID, it was unimpossible to think about digital work for my team. My team was called the Stempelbude. I don't think there's an expression for that in English. It's something like a house of stamps, or it's hard for me to translate. Stempelbude. This is where I started. And I was really annoyed by that naming, because, yeah, on the one hand, my people were sitting there with meters of documents each day. 3 times a day, there was delivered by the postman 1 meter of envelopes for each of my team members. I have 11 in my team, so you might have an opinion about how much paperwork needed to be done. And then we had Corona coming. No one was allowed to go to the office. Everyone was afraid. And people were also afraid to touch paper. Do you remember that? There was a discussion about the virus being on paper. And in my apartment, this was a big discussion. And you know what? It was unbelievable, but it happened. We changed laptops during the night with our IT department, because we weren't allowed to meet because one had COVID and the other were not. So we did it on the motorway, and we changed laptops. We did some things, and it took us only 2 or 3 weeks to change the system from paper-based to fully digitally issuance. And I think we have to take the signs of time, and we have to be powerful, and we have to be brave enough to walk in and say, stop to paper-based work, stop to this and that. I could read in the chat, for example, someone was writing, yes, tell that to third parties that require for the paper-based documents. I have that every day. Every day, there's a client saying, I need this in a paper-based version. And my standard answer is, who is asking? Your client or customs authorities? So this is the first thing. 100% go down to 5%, because it's always the client that asks for it, but it's in very rare cases, it's customs authorities. And if it's really a customs authority from a third party that asks for the paper-based document, I talk to them and I say, well, it's not necessary and we don't have it. Our standard system of issuance is electronic. So we cannot provide you with that, and we won't do that. And I can give it to you on a paper-based document if you want to have it. I can write it down for you. And that's what I did 2 or 3 times. And the more you say and the more you repeat and the more you show them, well, it's not a legal requirement, the less it is asked for it. So again, I want to go back to the point, we need to clean up the floor, and we need to provide everyone with the legal information that paper is not necessary at all. And it's almost the requirement by the client that I don't have a clue what they are doing with the paper, sitting on it, looking at it. They are really admiring German stamps, and they are really, I think they love it. Yeah, if they see a stamp from a German Chamber of Commerce, they're like, wow, this is a real document. No, it is not. And this is where we have to go to. Provide for the legal information that paper is not necessary and that an electronic document is valid as well. And that's what we do every day. That's what my team does the whole day, saying and telling everyone it's not necessary. And afterwards, they don't ask anymore. And this is how we reduce all over Germany the amount of questions from foreign parties and third countries for paper-based documents. The rate is getting less and less.
Yeah, I saw in the chat someone was referring to Stamping Hut as Stempelbude, but I also like the term House of Stamps. This has some Netflix vibes to me. Yeah, let's stick with House of Stamps. But I have the feeling that we could use game theory and behavioral economics for this issue. If we make the wet signature kind of with a double opt-in, if you really, really want the wet ink signature or something, can we nudge people to go away from paper? Is there any way? What do you think? Anna, I think this is a question for you.
I mean, it comes together for all of us, I guess. So there is the educational part in the legal world, of course, which is to be done by the lawyers in this area, and then also the educational, the mindshift part I was talking about earlier. I think the ICC is actually also taking steps in that direction. So in 2021, it's a major tongue twister, so I will try to get it out, but the ICC did issue the Uniform Rules for Digital Trade Transactions. There we go, which is a guideline for any digital transaction, which is also trying to regulate the payment obligation of that transaction as is. So I think all of these things really come together. I think it's not one thing in isolation. I think it's really something that we all as different parties in this market have to do together to achieve that transformation ultimately.
Yeah, and then there's another thing that came in my mind is when Johanna was pointing out that the whole world loves German stamps. I wonder why, because when we look from a technical perspective, there is no logical connection between the goods the stamp and the paper are referring to and the paper and the stamp. Where is the technical connection between those? In a digital world, this could be done by IoT devices being linked to a certain database, that data being somehow secured and all that. This gives us trust. But a stamp on the paper referring to some goods, the Chamber of Commerce, for example, have never seen before, does not give any security. So why is that so? Johanna, what do you think?
One example might be, I know from Egyptian customs authorities that they put the wet ink, wet signature under dropping water. And if the stamp disappears or the ink disappears, then it's a real document for them. So they really wash it up. Yeah, but I think this is not the phenomenon at all. I think if you take made in Germany, for example, what do people think when they hear made in Germany? It's always about high quality, high standards, good engineering, liability, whatever. Only good things are connected to made in Germany. And I think it's the same phenomenon with a German stamp by an authority. this means this is really checked, a really checked one document. This is really right what is written there. This is legally correct. And this, I think, this is what this this stamp is standing for, and this is why it is often required, because it gives a feeling of trust and a feeling of good work and a feeling of this is real and this is legal. And this is this is what I think why it is required. But what I recognized the last years is I started 10 years ago in this business. And we had, like, when I started, 40% to 50% of our amount in whole Germany, which is 1.4 million of certificates of origins. People were always demanding for a paper-based version because the third party was asking for it. And the more we were talking about it and the more we were providing information to the third parties and to third countries that it is not legally required, the less the amount is. Today, we have only in Munich, we have less than 1%, and it is only Egypt. It's the only country that made an exception during Corona and said, well, it's okay, you can issue the digital version, and afterwards they kind of swept back again. But we only have 1% left, and we started with 40% 10 years ago. And it was just our work saying, no, it is not legally required. And I think you asked the question, how can we do that? And I just say, we do it with a mess. 10 years ago, we only provided 60% of our certificates of origin on a digital basis. And today it's nearly 100%. So the other 40%, they were just convinced by the mess of COOs we issued to the world. And 10 years later, they believe that the digital version is as good as the paper-based one. It's just convincing day by day.
Ingo, what do you think?
First of all, I like the attitude of Johanna. I think if we have more than with you, I think we are much further in our way to become digital or paperless in the whole chain. But what we can do to bring all parties to a reasonable ground and thinking about what they are demanding is that we are explaining what is the difference between a wet ink signature and a stamp and the electronic ways which are possible. And what I've learned in the past is that what we do electronically has much more higher is much more reliable than everything else what we can do with stamps and ink, because the signature to fail a signature or to change a signature is so easy, for at least in the level what we are talking about, not about a crime scene or whatever, or to generate a duplicate of a stamp. It's so easy, but everybody talk about, oh, do we need another level of electronic signature level that become much more reliable or whatever. And if we compare these both point of views, then it must become very clear that even with the sign on glass, and with the sign on glass, normally it comes the timestamp and GPS location with. It's much more reliable than any signature we can give on paper and handle in some kind of legal fight. So I think that's what we can bring to our competitor or to our participants in the supply chain, that we explain that to everybody.
Yeah, what I found really interesting was the test whether a stamp is real or not is by destroying it. From an IT security perspective, that's nuts, actually. Henning, I saw you heavily shaking your head. What do you think about this test?
I really loved it. Some kind of pen testing IT system the comparison of having holding the stamp underwater. What I also saw in the chat, this was, I think, some very good point I think Johanna made. She pointed out that some of their clients and companies do not have any kind of ERP system. And so what came into my mind is that we have to have in mind that by connecting systems, having APIs and so in place, we do not, I think it's important not to have barriers to be set up. So we will have big companies owning big ERP systems that are easily to be connected, but we always have to have a fallback option. So for example, the happy path is an API connection, and a bit less happy path could be a portal where you enter the data. I think the worst thing we could do is to set up barriers where we exclude people from participate in this digital trade. I think it's a very, very good point that came up.
Yeah, I see it here in the chat. No master data, no digitization. Yeah, that's definitely true. Or reframe it in a different way. Bullshit in, bullshit out. Also an issue. So how do you maintain data quality? Actually, Felix. I mean, you have a long history of data in your local systems, but how do you maintain the quality throughout the process?
Yeah, thanks for this question. As I explained a bit earlier in this discussion, the thing is to, let's say, try to to provide the necessary tools in order to ensure that the entire life cycle of a bond, or even further of a bond and guarantee facility, is brought into the digital orbit. So really make it from the application for the facility, including the credit assessment of the client, put everything in a digital format and make it as easy as possible for both for distribution partners, but also for the client itself. And walk him through the entire process. We did this. We started with this in 2015, digitized at least for the client the entire life cycle, except the claims part, including the backend process on our side. For example, sanctions checks always to be done when onboarding a client, before issuance of a bond, or before doing claims payment. So that's, let's say, our solution and our proposal to the market to really come up with digital solutions and leading by example, and really show it to the client. It's much more convenient for itself, and also for us. And usually when things are becoming less manual work, we can also, let's say, make sure we keep a very attractive pricing.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. Very interesting. So unfortunately, we have only roughly 10 minutes left, and this 10 minutes I want to use for the second half of our panel. For paperless trade and beyond. And I have a very personal question for all of you, and it would be very nice if you could answer it one by one in a brief statement. So the panel is called Paperless Trade and Beyond, but how do you envisage the future? And yeah, maybe Anna, you just start. You're right next to me. How do you envisage the future of trade, international trade? Just briefly.
I hope, and I'm not sure exactly what it will look like, but I hope it will one day become as seamless and as uncomplicated as we experience online banking or the other minor things we do on a day-to-day. I know it's a very vague comparison because those are two substantially different things, but I also think that for the time being, we really need to give it time, as much as that's frustrating to admit to ourselves, because we can't reinvent the wheel overnight. So I think the process will take time, but we will get there. But I really hope it will be as uncomplicated as many things we do in digital banking these days. So
yeah, thank you, Anna. Johanna, you're next.
Yeah, when I think about the future in this matter, I don't have a clear picture because I think it's a never-ending modeling and shaping process, because we always have to adapt to the current status out of this state of the art, and it's developing so fast. And if you take a look at your mobile 10 years ago, or your first Nokia 8210, and the smartphones we have today, digital times are changing so fast. And I think if we want to be on top of the world, if we want to have efficient and smart ways of trading and dealing all over the globe, then we need to develop every day. And we don't have a final system or a final picture of the future. I think it's something we have to work on every day, and it's changing not every day, but I think every year we're going further and we are talking about new technical solutions. So I think if I take a look in the future, it's a permanent process of working and improving on the digital systems. There will be never an end. We always have to work to improve and to adapt and to go on.
Thank you. Ingo, what do you think?
I want to have a look much further in the future. And from there, I think or hope that we have two parts of all the supply chain. On the one hand, we have the physical flow, which will not change because we will not beam anything. But on the other hand, I think all the administration flow will be in a digital twin. And the whole administration process will be parallel to the physical flow. And there is no discussion anymore about paper or not, because in the digital world, we do not need any paper and everything is data. And probably in 15 years, we have the same panel again, and we're laughing about the times 15 years ago.
Yeah, Felix, what do you think? Will we laugh?
I hope so. I have to admit, I don't, let's say, have a vision for the entire global trade. But let's say, speaking for my part of it, I tend to agree with Henning that the best way to going forward would really be to, let's say, not engineer on the next big thing, the all happy solution, rather try to automate single small processes and make sure, let's say, we are getting there step by step in order to have the highest degree of automation possible. But I'm also a strong believer that to a certain extent there will always be a kind of manual work required, and also maybe a kind of particular involvement, in particular of lawyers, because it easy as it is, let's say, to automate and to digitize, let's say, repeatable and more simple processes and decision, there's still room left, let's say, for really to focus on, and that's usually needs some manual work and some deep dive, and therefore, I think we are getting there. But my final vision for the entire global supply chain, I'm not sure.
Thank you, Henning.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to add a bit of a tech view to sum up. We have some user experience engineers, UX guys, that are heavily driven by making software easy to use, and we have the vision that B2B software could be as easy to use as B2C software, and we hope I think it's also possible to make working with this system to be some fun. And I would like to adapt this statement a bit to this session. I think it's not necessary to have ugly and painful processes to make them trustable.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Henning.
Okay.
Philipp.
Yeah, I'd like to place a bet. So from my perspective, there is one of the big players coming up with an invention associated with a big cost reduction or some of bigger earnings. and just setting a standard. I don't know which one it is, but I would place a bet on the banks.
Okay.
It's just my
Very interesting.
educated guess.
Okay, yeah, so we have to do this in 2033 to figure out who was right. Just my closing remarks for this round. I was expecting someone of you will mention artificial intelligence, but no one did. And I think that says a lot. And I think I'm very close. If I give my personal vision, I'm very close to Johanna's statement. I think there's a lot of work to be done right now, but there will be a lot of work to be done in the future as the technology will progress, as the international environment will change, and we have to permanently adapt to that. But I think there will be a point, and I hope it will be in 10 years, where paper as medium will be not as frequently used as it is today, and it is way more natural for us to do also our business transactions in the digital form, and not only the business transactions, but also the business to government communications. Yeah. So thank you all for this very vivid discussion. I'm super happy we could somehow get it into the digital world. I think when we would have seen each other in live, it would be way more fun. But when I see in our chat room, people were very happy, applauding. That's the applause for you. It's unfortunately only virtual, but in the real world, feel applauded. Thank you very much. The ICC will continue on this. We will be working hard to get fully paperless. We are dedicated for digital trade. We will help the international industry and especially the German industry to adapt the digital standards, EUCP, EU RDGs, but also the URDTTs Anna also mentioned, to have a fully digital live transaction, hopefully by the end of the year, with many iterations in place. And everyone here on the panel, but also everyone worldwide is happily invited to join us on our journey and work together and learn together how a digital trade, paperless trade could work. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend, and I hope we'll see each other again in live in real time. Thank you.
Thanks for the excellent moderation, for having us, for having this platform. Thank you, David. Thank you, Philipp. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Same from me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Great to have you here.
Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Big
bye-bye.
thank you also from my end.
Bye. Have a good
Bye-bye.
Bye.